Hey everyone, this is Disc Junkie and welcome back to Secondhand Sickness. And so today I'm out and about. I'm actually going on a bit of a road trip. Gonna be driving for about an hour and a half because I received a tip from one of my friends who told me that he had essentially stopped by this guy who had like a farm and an old barn and stuff that he had sort of purchased, and now he was clearing stuff out. And apparently this old barn used to be used for recording amateur porn. So obviously he contacted me, and so I'm not really sure what I expect to get from this trip, but I was able to reach out to this guy who owns the farm, and he essentially showed me that he had found a couple of old vintage mags from like the 70s and 80s, and so I made him an offer on this, not really much. Essentially told him that I would buy, I think it was 5 or 6 magazines for roughly €20, and that's sort of what they are worth for me. But I really wanted to sort of set up a meeting with this guy because I desperately want to visit this farm, sort of poke around, see if he has some other stuff. But that is the adventure we are going on today, so I'll be driving for a while and I will turn on the camera again once we arrive to our destination. So just stay tuned. We are closing in on our destination. Let's see if this is the place we're supposed to turn off. I think it is. Yeah, here it just says. It's a small sign for the church. So let's just go ahead and turn off here and see where we end up. There seems to be a farm up here. That's where I'm supposed to go. I have no idea. And here is some guy, so let's see, maybe this is the guy I'm supposed to be seeing. Tjena!
Japp.
Okej. Var ska jag ställa mig någonstans? Valfritt. Ja, toppen. Tack. Okay, so here we go. Ja, precis. Jag har några sådana här klassiska röda liksom med
det där måste ju vara 40-tal eller något sånt där, tänker jag. Ja. Sen är det ju mycket här när vi klappar i kulver. Vi klättrar dem in här.
Se vad fan man sätter fötterna.
Lustgastuber hade de. Kan man väl tänka sig kanske matcha i de här östfilmkamerorna ifrån. Ja. Här inne låg det massa tidningar och prylar. Det kan ligga lite random.
Mm. Kassaapparater. Alright, so I just got done, and as you saw from the footage, there was essentially a whole lot of junk. That's pretty much what it was. I'm not really sure about the exact story behind this, but there was essentially a very dilapidated barn which has sort of collapsed halfway. And so we started going in here and sort of looking through some of the stuff, generally rummaging around, because this is essentially where he had already found some few magazines of vintage porn. And I will say that I already knew about this small batch of 5 or 6 magazines, and so this is essentially what I went to pick up. I was hoping to find more stuff, but it was just too much and I didn't have the time and didn't really feel that I wanted to rummage around too much in there, because like the air didn't feel too good. So yeah, I just decided to be happy with what I got, the stuff he had already promised me. So now I'm gonna drive back, and it still feels good that I've sort of established a connection with him. So the next time he finds something as he's clearing this stuff out, he will give me a text message or a call, and maybe this will lead to something better. I don't know. But now I'm gonna drive back, and then I'm gonna show you the stuff that I actually did pick up. So just stay tuned. Alright, so I'm back at the table, and it's high time to go through the finds of today. Now, I will mention that most of these things are going to be XXX rated, so I can't really show them in any sort of detail, but I will try to show you what I can. So, first thing which I got is this small little flyer for something known as Bella Shop, which was apparently like a sort of typical sex shop back in the 80s or 70s, I assume. So yeah, this was based in Gothenburg, and yeah, if you know Sweden, you can just make out what this is, but otherwise I'm not really gonna get into the details. So that was the first thing, and the second thing I want to show is this, which is something referred to as a contact guide, and most of the stuff I got is essentially of the same nature. And a contact guide would be this small little book or brochure which essentially has personal ads, but they're in a sort of sexualized fashion. So I can just turn this over, and I've tried to censor it, but you can see that this was actually quite X-rated. Essentially have a guy masturbating on the back, and so I can't really flip through this in any sort of detail. But yeah, we might get back to some of this just to show you kind of what the ads were like, but there's essentially black and white photos sent in from people, like their personal photos to go with their personal ad. Like, you know, I'm looking for whatever, like BDSM male or such, and here's like a pic of me, like, you know, it's the old sort of really sort of early version of sending dick pics, except that you're sending it to this brochure, and then someone can read your personal ad and be like, ah, that's a nice dick, I really like to hook up with that guy. I don't know. And this particular one is actually called the Gay Quickie, or Guy Snubben. So this would obviously be aimed towards a male or gay crowd. So that's the first thing I got, or the second sort of thing, but the first little brochure. So next up is one which seems a bit more straight, which is another sort of contact guide. This is from 1983, has a woman on the cover, nothing really interesting on the back, but this is pretty much the same thing. You essentially have personal ads with a variety of X-rated photos. I can't really show anything from this, I'm sorry. But so that is the second little brochure. Here is another one, also contact guide, you know, lots of photos, 50% female ads. This is from 1984. Flipping it over, this is essentially the same series. You can see it's the same back cover. Next up is a variety on this, which is called the Contact Journal. This is from 1983, 1984. Lots of sexual contacts, all women, male, couple, etc. Images, sexual advice, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, and then it says right here, with, God, I can't even translate this. Okay. This features our horny readers' personally typed ads. So like, yeah, it's personal ads once again. And there's just at the back with some women getting happy and fraternizing in a bed, a bit of a threesome. So here's another issue from that very series, also the Contact Journal, from 1983, censored on the front, centered on the back, got a bit of a blowjob action there. So yeah, it just keeps going, and this was essentially the kind of batch that he was able to offer me. And this is also the stuff that I already knew that he had, that I had already made an offer on, which was 200 Swedish crowns for the entire lot, which is 20 euro. And so here's one which seems to be missing the front and back, but here you can see a little bit of an example as to what these were like. So here you just have like various sort of short personal ads, like just pick out an example. So here we got woman, 37 years of age, Gothenburg, looking for horny men who enjoy everything about sex. And then it just says sort of right, and if I like you, I will be down for any of your demands, 100% discretion. And then it just says like reply to, and then there's like a small 6-digit number, which means that when you write back, you sort of send in a letter, I would assume, to this contact journal, like an address, and then you put a reference here, which is the number of the ad, and then that will be forwarded to whoever wrote the ad. I think that's sort of the gist of how this works, but I'm honestly not an expert. And last but not least, from this little sort of magazine lot, was this thing, which is called Sex 6000. And this is from something known as Soho Sex Club, or the Soho Sex Shop. And this is actually quite a notorious sort of bookshop or sex shop, which I've heard about in these sort of documentaries about the 80s and the 70s, and sort of like the prostitution and sex clubs and stuff like that. And this is one of those infamous clubs which is pretty commonly mentioned in that type of material. So I was really curious as to what this was, and started flipping through it and realized that this is something I actually can show, because it doesn't actually feature nudity as much as the other ones. But this is essentially a vintage catalog of dildos and various sexual type of devices. And I'm sorry, but just look at these little instructional images here. Yeah, like you're gonna be placing your dildo on a horse's back, among other things, or on your desk drawer. I mean, these are just insane. But yeah, so for anyone who thought like, you know, we are very sort of sexually advanced today, and that they didn't really have sex toys back in the 70s and 80s, or whenever this is from, yeah, you are greatly mistaken. They essentially had all the kinds of stuff that we had. I mean, I can't even understand what some of these things are. But maybe that's just me being prudish, I don't know. So yeah, it definitely comes in all shapes and sizes. So here we got some vintage sex dolls. These are not actual people. Don't be fooled by the amazing detail in these dolls. And I think this is essentially the last page. I can't really show you because I noticed there were some sort of still photos of nudity, actual nudity with real people, but these are just sort of sex toys and sex dolls. So I thought this was kind of interesting to show. I haven't really sort of read through these yet, but I really do like the bizarro vintage sort of in-depth look that this offers. Like, for example, here's one which is known as Miss Pinky, which is apparently a fake vagina made like a woman's face in plastic, and a lot of this is just the stuff of nightmares. Like, it feels like such a bizarro early sort of 80s trope in regards to just seeing these really weird and strange and early variations of sexual toys and dildos and whatever. So yeah, I thought we would at least give you some enjoyment of just seeing what the contents were of that. But this is essentially all I got from today's lot in the weirdo creepy barn, even though he had found this prior to my arrival and I didn't actually sniff these out myself. Okay, sniff these out was not a good turn of phrase, but you know what I mean. So yeah, this is it for that lot. And this would be sort of where things ended today, except that when I was driving home, I saw this sign for a yard sale, which I felt like, you know, never gonna pass up on a yard sale. And this wasn't even a manned yard sale, this was an unmanned yard sale. There's a sign out front which just says like yard sale, and then there is a telephone number, which means that you can essentially send money to this number. Like, it's a thing we have in Sweden which is called Swish, which is just like a very sort of broad and generally accepted term of kind of payment. So if you just have someone's phone number and you know they're connected to this sort of Swish app, you can send them money, actual money, digitally, just by using their phone number. So that's essentially what this person did. They just left their number on a sign saying like, you know, pay whatever you want to pay if you find anything that you want. And so I checked out this table and actually stumbled over a pretty cool looking spike collar. This can obviously be used for dogs, and it can also be used for, I don't know, gothic or emo sort of couture, like your typical sort of choker, I suppose. Yeah, you know, I'm very much into punk couture. I don't generally wear chokers, but this is a very sort of heavy duty and high quality sort of spike collar, I would say. So I wouldn't mind wrapping this like around my leg, around my boot, whatever. I just thought it looked like it's actually in pretty good quality, not worn. Looks like it hasn't hardly been used at all. So I essentially left her 20 Swedish crowns, which is like €2. I mean, if you're gonna go ahead and leave this kind of stuff out for people to just grab, I mean, you know, someone could drop by there and just take whatever they wanted and not pay. But I felt like, you know, she would want something for this, and €2 is probably less than it's worth. But at the same time, if people leave stuff out like this for anyone to grab and just leave whatever kind of money they think it's worth, I don't think they're expecting too much for this. So I'm sure she was happy with the €2 that I left. So I essentially had cash, and I just left this in a small jar which was marked with like, you know, payment or whatever if you want to leave cash. So yeah, got that for €2. Very surprising find at the end of the day. But that is pretty much it for all of the stuff I found today. Now, I will say that seeing as this is not a super huge lot, I also want to throw in some bonus finds which I've essentially picked up online in recent times. And the first thing I want to mention is a small book which is from a series known as John Stake. And so this is very much like a Swedish, I suppose, kind of Austin Power type character, which essentially is like a bit of an agent, but it's essentially very adult oriented. Like, it's a bit sort of sleazy and sexual and whatnot. I haven't actually read this, but just based on the cover, there's some nudie shots, and it feels like a very sort of 70s, 80s kind of secret agent parody trope, as you can see from the censored image here. So yeah, this was, I believe, something like €10. I got this from another collector as part of a bundle deal, so thought this was a fun thing to add. And then I also picked up just the other week a book which I've been looking for, that is from the Kurt Hausson label, and it's called All of the World's Sex Records from A to Z, but it's the Swedish alphabet, so A through E, which isn't actually the last letter of the Swedish alphabet, so very odd printing there. But in any case, this is pretty much like a sort of sexual encyclopedia, I suppose. So it essentially has a whole bunch of images and various sort of articles about sexual world records. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really gonna flip through this, but I just really like the design. And this is a book I've been looking for, seeing as I generally tend to collect books from Kurt Hausson. So this was a really fun addition to my already existing collection, because a lot of the time it's really hard to find these titles because there's so very sort of little documentation as to what titles are actually available and what books have been released. So I'm always very happily surprised when I stumble over a book which I haven't really heard about, and this was actually one of those examples I hadn't really seen before. And so that is pretty much it. I got one more book which I want to show. It's actually a pretty big book, so I'm going to move that to the side. And it's a international book from Peter Barry that is called The Complete Book of Photographing Women. And I think this is from the 80s, but I'm not entirely sure. You just flip it over, and it has a variety of photographs of women, like But a lot of this is very much sort of 80s, and there's a lot of nudie shots with like, maybe not like hardcore stuff, but more like posing and sort of striptease things from the 80s. But yeah, you can see images like this, but sometimes there's more nudity, sometimes there's not, but it's not really a triple X-rated book. Like, it's not really pornography, it's more like model photographing. But I essentially found this at a Swedish website, like a secondhand book marketplace, and it was pretty cheap. I think I paid something like €7 for this, and I checked eBay, and you know, it varies in terms of prices, but I would definitely say that it's worth the €7 that I paid. So I'm just gonna lay this down in the middle of the lot, even though I do sort of tend to cover up quite a bit. But yeah, so that is essentially everything for today. And I gotta say that this was a really fun lot. I was definitely happy with finding the main part of this lot for only 200 Swedish crowns. I mean, €20 for all the stuff that I got from the weirdo barn guy was definitely worth it. And then these bonus things were just to sort of fill up the time of this video. But yeah, that is essentially it. And so I want to say thank you very much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. And as usual, hope to see you all next time.